all ye people. Give ear, all ye inhabitants of the world, both high and low, rich and poor together. Do you indeed speak righteousness? Do you judge uprightly, all ye sons and daughters of men? And do you judge as others judge? For as you judge, you shall be judged. And if you condemn, you are condemned. Pass on. But there is no return.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Profession Confession. I'm your host, Gabe Noah. With me, as always, is the chocolate unicorn, Tevin Pittman.
Yes, sir.
The Caramelicious one in the back today.
Somebody's got to do it.
Because we have a special episode. We have a very rare episode, actually, in that we're having a remote guest, which we've privately said we won't do that. But I think we're breaking, multiple times. And this was one that, quite frankly, when she reached out, I was like, oh, another crackpot who wants to be on our show. And then I read and called her and met her, and it's just, it's gold, I tell you. It's gold. This is the exact kind of perversion that I want to live in, that I want to surround myself with all the time, without actually participating. But yeah, our guest, her name is Stephanie Parent. She is a professional submissive. She also did dom work, but it's in one of the only commercial dungeons in Los Angeles. So there was two of them. And so like the difference is that there's some dungeons that an individual dom might run, or whoever the perverted person is who has to have a dungeon. And then people go to them. This is some where any Tom, Dick, or Harry can walk in off the street and get their kicks. So this is, which I think is, in a way, so much more interesting and terrifying. The more I thought about this as a submissive, for anyone who doesn't know, a submissive, before I introduce the guest, I'll kind of lay the groundwork a little bit. Just a submissive, for anyone who doesn't know. You know what? How about this? Stephanie, why don't you describe what this is instead of me pretending like I know what the fuck it is? Our guest, Stephanie Parent, is also an author, a writer?
Yeah.
What do you say?
It doesn't matter. I don't know.
Author makes it sound like it's like children's books, but
No,
these are not.
Writer works.
Okay.
I have written children's books, actually. Believe it or not, that was what I wanted to do in the past, but that's not what people are interested in.
I believe it.
I don't
Actually,
think we're going to get many shares on the children's book, Profession Confession.
but yeah, so what is, I mean, I generally know what a submissive is and a
Right.
dom, but yeah, if you don't mind laying it out for the people.
Right. So basically BDSM stands for bondage, domination, submissive, sadomasochism, and I think there's a few more. Oh, also, those are the main ones. But so basically it's a power exchange that occurs mainly in sexual contexts, but it does not have to be sexual. It could just be role play, but there is somebody who is the dominant person, so the person who is in control, and there is somebody who is the submissive person who is under the dominant's control in this interaction, which would occur within set parameters. So at a dungeon, it would likely be within, say, an hour session. If in your personal life, it might be for much longer. Some people do, full relationships 24/7 BDSM type things, or it could just be for a couple hours for fun. But so dominant submissive is a way of describing it that really is just about the power exchange. So the dominant is the person who is in control. The submissive is basically doing what the dominant says. But of course, there is always a safe word, particularly in professional BDSM. So if the dominant crosses the submissive's limits, then the submissive could use their safe word to stop the scene. The other words like sadomasochism would imply more that the top is giving pain and that the submissive is receiving pain. So there's all sort of ways that this can go. You can be a submissive without liking pain. I did like pain, but the dominant submissive part of it is really just about the power exchange would be the main idea.
Okay. That does it perfectly. As someone who's been dominant my entire life, it's very hard to. I thought that the people who were submissive for the most part just weren't as dominant, so they get dominated. Like I didn't realize that it can be your main sexual kink in a sense. I mean, right. I do get that. Yeah. I do understand that. It's what's interesting to me is that you like that's your main kick, right? And
yeah, I would say so.
and the extent of that gets pretty far reaching for you. In your thing you sent me, you like like one that stuck out was that you like being trampled.
Yeah, I know that's pretty rare for a woman. I think it's much more common for men to like that.
Is that like by a herd of deer?
Right.
Or yeah.
Like what is like what goes into a trampling? Is that different than just being stepped on?
Can one person do it?
No, I mean it's just a fancy word for just being stepped on. I mean, I didn't do it a lot at the dungeon. I had a couple special people I did it with, but it wasn't something because it's something that could be probably abused. You know, you don't want a 6-foot guy putting your.
I was just going to say, is there like a weight limit to the guy that walks
probably. I mean, I think most of the people I did it with, including like my ex-boyfriend and a couple clients, were probably holding back a little. Like they probably weren't putting their full weight on me. Although there was one client who wanted to step on my stomach with his full weight, which was a little crazy. I can't believe that I let him do that. I should not have let him do that.
Hard to come if you don't, though. I mean, I would think like, too. Yeah, like, I mean, putting myself in his shoes, hard to jizz if you don't put the full force into it, at least for a second.
No, with my ex-boyfriend, like he would wear his dirty boots when he trampled my back. So it was less about like the weight and more about
like your
the dirtiness of it.
You know? I understand that. So. And Tevin, just on-air production meeting here. The TV in here is about to turn off. If you don't mind jiving, yeah. So can you kind of describe like before we get into your stories, can you describe or whatever the dungeon to people, like what it was like, how big was it, how much did it cost, those kind of things?
So it was just a house in West LA. It just looked like a house from the outside. You would never know if you were passing it. In fact, I tried to find it before I was going to work there and I couldn't find it. It was just on a residential street. And I had always been kind of like, I'd always wanted to maybe work at some kind of sex work type place, but I was always like thought it was going to be in a bad neighborhood or just an industrial place or a dark alley, you know.
Especially BDSM stuff. I can see being.
This was not like that at all. It was very pretty little cottage. And then there was another building, which was just another house next door or across the street from the parking lot, which they took on later that we called the annex. So it was just two buildings with a parking lot in between them. And
how many rooms?
So downstairs there was the lobby room and then the interview room, and then there was a room. There were two rooms where we could hang out, but they were also occasionally used for sessions. Then there were two rooms upstairs, which were generally where the submissive session, and they were both nice big rooms. And then in the building next door, there were 4 additional rooms. So quite a few, actually, but some of them were very small.
So there were
different themes.
So each discipline has their own kind of space or room or whatever.
Well, the idea of that was just that they would try to keep the submissives upstairs if possible, because then they were right below the front desk, basically. So if we had to call for help, we were closer versus in the building across the annex, across the parking lot, we could still call for help, but it was a little, it might be a little harder to get help. So if you're the dominant, you're the one in control and you've been working there longer and you just kind of know more what's up, then you're less likely to need help.
Was that a common thing to need to call for help?
No, it was very, very rare. And in fact, when it did come, it was not for the reasons you would think it would be. It would be more like because one time somebody fainted, something like that. So not necessarily because somebody was behaving badly.
From pure just orgasmic ecstasy.
I can't believe what this bitch is letting me do. I'm so happy.
Unfortunately, I don't think it was that. And we actually had a lot of our clients were on the older side. So I think it was something to do.
God, because they have a bunch of pent up anger. What was the process for, before we get into the stories, was the last kind of thing is how did these people become clients? Like, is there a big qualifying process? Is it,
No.
Literally anyone can walk in?
I mean, literally, and I think you asked me, it's literally you could walk in off the street and say, I want to do a session. Now, if you came in and you were obviously homeless or you reeked of alcohol or something like that, then they would probably say, sorry, this is not going to work out. But
Sir,
anybody could come in. Anybody could come off the street, but of course you would have to have heard of the dungeon. But a lot of people did hear of it. And then there was a time, I don't remember how long it was ago exactly, but a time when they were really cracking down on a lot of the other listings. So then a lot of people kind of found the dungeon because we're legal and we don't do full sex work. So we were able to stay open and keep advertising. So a lot of people found it and thought that we were going to do things that we don't do. So we would have people come in expecting those things. And we'd still let them session. We'd just say, we don't do sex here. We don't do full nudity. And they would just have to understand that. So, but
really?
They would come in and they would do it. Yeah.
So like you'd get your ass caned in a bikini or whatever.
Well, so as the female client would just always keep your G-string on.
Okay.
So it was very, very small scrap of fabric, but it was there.
Right. Put this dental floss over your ass.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We only want them to see the right half and the left half of your asshole.
Yeah. I mean, those G-strings are pretty small.
Right. So so anyone can walk in. I'd imagine there's regular clients. What did this kind of thing cost?
So
and how did the session
actually,
work?
I was confused when I talked to you on the phone before. So if I say anything about money that seems really wrong, it's probably because I'm bad at math.
Okay.
But I have it down now. So a half hour session, which was the cheapest you could do, a half-hour session was $120. So the submissive or dominant, the woman would get $60 and then the house gets $60. So I think I told you it cost $60, but I was mixed up. It means I got $60, the house got $60. It cost $120.
So you get $60 for a half hour.
Okay. Yeah, for half an hour. And then up to an hour was $200 and I would get 100 of that. And then gratuities were encouraged, but not required. Some clients were extremely generous with them. And then some clients didn't know that they were supposed to do it. So it was a total range.
Yeah, I think by rule of thumb, if you just get to walking off the street and like beat somebody for like not beat, but whatever, be dominant to somebody, you should probably throw them an extra couple of dollars when you walk out the door.
Anytime you rough a woman up, it's customary to leave some money.
That's another 20%. Thing is that we had something called heavy sessions, which is where if you hit the woman hard enough to bruise, or you used wooden paddles, which leave much deeper bruises, or especially if you caned, there was an extra fee for that. So that was an extra $100 per hour. And then cane strokes was an extra $10 per stroke. So that could
$100 per stroke?
No, $10 per stroke. So it was $100 per hour for the heavy session, and then extra on top of that $10 per stroke.
But if you let your rage loose, there's no way you're not caning a woman less than 10 times. If you cane her once, you're caning 10.
One time somebody caned me, I think maybe 40 times. So that was $400 just there.
And how did that
feel? On top
feel?
of all the other.
Were you weeping?
No. I mean, I had a really high pain tolerance when I started. And I enjoyed it. There were things that did make me cry, but not that. So you get high, kind of. You get endorphins going, and you get high once you start. So by like the 30th one, it really just feels good, to be honest.
Actually, I read a thing about cutters, right? That's like the whole thing about cutters is that it releases the same. I don't know if it's gabapentin or whatever it is, but it's the exact same thing as a drug high or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Is that you get a true release?
Yes.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. And so,
although it does get tricky when you're doing it for a job, because just like with regular drugs, you build up a tolerance and it stops working as well. And then also if clients are rude or disrespectful or purposefully doing things wrong, and then things start to get associated with bad connotations rather than good, then it stops working as well. So there are times when you don't get that high, but definitely the first year or so that I worked there,
that must be really
loopy and high a lot of the times.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead,
and I know you kind of went over kind of the layout of the dungeon that you worked at, but what was kind of the overall like atmosphere of it? Was it set up to be like sexy? Is it like dark, just velvet red covering everything?
Like yes. What? So it was different rooms, so it was different in every room. But so from the outside, it was just meant to look like a normal house. It was kind of charming and cute. But then as soon as you walked in the lobby, it was basically leather chairs. It was dark. I mean, there were some BDSM pictures on the wall. There were old pictures from when the dungeon started, because the dungeon had been there since the 80s. There was a picture of every girl who worked there at the time. So it was subtle. Like, it wasn't like there were chains hanging from the ceiling or anything bad. But it was subtle. And then every room kind of had a different feel to it. So like there was one room that was really supposed to be the dungeon room, and it had like a metal floor and a big like ball and chain and stocks and all kinds of crazy.
You mean my ex-wife was in there?
Wait, what are stocks?
Not a fun room to session in because it was just kind of cold and dismal. But actually, you told me that the other woman you talked to had said something about I don't know if I. Well, so we had once.
She did a crucifixion.
If I can mention the other session, it's something about like a crucifixion session, and we actually had something similar to that, although less extreme. And like for example, that we did in the dungeon room. Whenever somebody would come in and ask for something like that, that was very like a serious punishment scene, we would definitely take them to that room. But most of the rooms were. They all had, the basic pieces of equipment would be the same. There would be a bondage bed, so it's like a big bed, but with with the chains or the hooks on the side.
Do you have like and then there would the X wall or whatever the X thing?
So that's called the St. Andrew's cross.
Yes.
So there was a St. Andrew's cross in pretty much every room too. There was usually a cage in every room. What else was in every room? A suspension bar. So just these basic things, but then there was always a different theme. Like one of the rooms had animal prints. So the floor was animal print. All the blankets were leopard and tiger print. One of the rooms was red and black. One of the rooms was purple. And then we did have one room that really didn't have any BDSM stuff at all. It was small, but it was just like a sofa and a mirror and pictures of Betty Page and just like kind of cute 1950s style pictures. So
like
that was kind of room for
the hack BDSM room.
Wait, isn't that Andrews?
Yeah, so that was for people who wanted to do more, we would call it a domestic scene. If you wanted to role play a spanking scene, like a husband and wife spanking, or
your wife turns into a bitch and then starts spanking you.
In the Andrews machine, does that spin too?
No,
right?
No, it's not a St. Andrew's.
I think you're thinking of the circus.
St. Andrew's cross.
Okay,
spin.
never mind. I thought okay.
You're thinking of the knife thrower at the circus.
But no, we didn't have any that spun at our dungeon, but I believe there are some that can rotate you upside down. So we didn't have that.
What are some of the most?
The last room before we go on, just let me add. We also had one that was like set up like a schoolroom. So because a lot of people wanted to do naughty schoolgirl.
One of my least favorite porn tropes. Truly.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I don't watch them, but what not to shame anyone else's. I don't do that. I'm far too depraved to shame others. But what are among the most extreme requests that a first timer walks in with? It's so odd to me to be anyone who walks in off the street, right? Or to have this urge and go, God, I've wanted to rough up a woman for a long time. I want to step on one, and that would really make me come, or whatever. And then, I'm going to go to the yellow pages. I find this, go in. What is their comfort?
So that's a hard question to answer because there's so many different possibilities. Like I could talk about that for a long time because there were the people who were walking in from the street who really just didn't know what it was and kind of wanted more of a stripper type experience. And we would definitely session with them and give them, what we could. Like I said, we couldn't get fully nude, but so that would be more like
tits out,
they
though?
might ask for what did you say?
Tits out though?
Yeah.
Okay. Tits out, yeah. G-string on, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, I thought you said kit. I was like, kits? What is kit? No. Tits definitely out.
Tits. Yeah. If I ever say anything sounding like it's tits. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's actually a good example because somebody who really just wanted a stripper experience, they might be like, I want to do nipple torture. And they might just like squeeze your nipples for a couple minutes, but they really just kind of wanted to grope you. So that's one example. But then there might be other, there were definitely people who had been really fantasizing about BDSM for a long time and were scared to do it or just didn't have the means to do it for whatever reason and would come in for the first time. Now, I would say most of those were actually submissive men. And my guess would be that's because up until recently, at least, it's been a little less culturally acceptable for a man to be submissive. So that would be something a man would probably have a harder time maybe admitting to his wife or girlfriend versus to be dominant is a little more acceptable.
That's true. Except doms have been around a long time, obviously, right? So it's like it's been in the culture a long time, but
yes.
yeah, you never admit that, right?
We would see a lot of men who they didn't want to admit that to their wife or their girlfriend.
Oh, yeah.
That was a separate thing. So if a man was coming in and he just wanted to spank a woman and he never done that before, it would tend to be pretty tame requests, but those were some of my favorite sessions to do. If a man had never spanked a woman before and he obviously loved it, that would be great. And then that would go the other way too, if a guy really wanted to be spanked and had never done it before. And it would just be a really simple, like almost innocent session, but just when you fantasize for something for so long and then you finally do it, and that kind of magic can never be recreated. But when you asked extreme, so I do want to say, so there are some, what I would notice is that guys who might have like a fairly tame fantasy, but then if you have a fantasy for so long and you don't get to release it in any way or share it with anybody, it tends to get really, really intense over time. So that by the time you finally do share it with somebody, it's super intense. So we would have guys who would come in who would have these like intense, like bathroom type fantasies. And we didn't do that, but they would like have these long descriptions of how they wanted us to like poop in their mouths and how they would feed us prunes. And sorry if it's getting gross. And like,
no, I love it.
All this stuff. So we didn't do that, but we would obviously talk about any of it. So stuff like that. There was a lot of that type of stuff. There was one guy who he'd never done anything. And he was like, I don't know what I want to do. So he just kind of came up and he wanted to try it all. So this was actually when I was still a sub, but 2 DOMs were playing with him. And then they asked like literally every sub who was working that day to come up and see him because he wanted to be humiliated. So they wrote stuff all over his body in lipstick, like slut, whore, cunt, whatever you could think of. I think they wrapped him in saran wrap. They tied up his cock and balls and tied him up and spanked him, like everything. Like he had done nothing and he wanted it all.
Well, let's slow down just a little bit on this because I'm dying to kind of take some of these apart. So when a guy comes in, so especially because you're kind of representing this as if they're like kind of timid, new, and then he goes, I kind of want to shit in your mouth, and I want you to eat, or I want to eat prunes, or they want you to eat prunes, whatever. Is there any what is there? I guess, first of all, what's the first time you heard that? And were you ready for that? You know what I mean? Like how do you, if you're not into that, how do you, I don't know, react to that?
The first time that I met somebody who was into the bathroom stuff. The first person that I met who was into that was so sweet that after that, I couldn't really judge anybody for that or think it was gross because this first person was so sweet. He was this older man. He'd been coming to the dungeon for so long, and he would sit in the lobby and he would be very polite in the lobby and not talk about that stuff. He would talk about like poetry or old Hollywood. He had I don't know if he had ever worked in Hollywood, but he had the air of somebody who had been like, I don't know, a screenwriter in the 60s or something. Who's a much older man. And he would, just session with DOMs, but he would want subs to come in and watch and talk to him because a lot of them like that, like the humiliation aspect of it. And what he was into was farting. Like he wanted a DOM to fart in his face and he would smell it and sniff it up. He was also into acting like a dog. So those 2 things going together. But I would come into the session to just like laugh at him for 10 minutes. And I would just say, oh, you're so ridiculous. So I'm not a big cursor. And so I wouldn't always go straight to being like, oh, you're so filthy. You're disgusting.
Right. You're pathetic.
It was just like, oh, you're so ridiculous. But for some reason, he loved that. Like, and he wanted me to come back in every session and just say, you're so ridiculous. And he was so sweet. And then as soon as he had a session and he was done, he would just want to go into like having a philosophical conversation or talking about poetry or something like that. But he was really into farting. Like he would just talk, he would be like, oh, your farts would smell so good in my face. But he didn't actually want you to do it. He just wanted to talk about it. And then what he would do is
fart in your face?
He wanted us to fart in his face. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've done stripper episodes and had them
want to fart in my face.
Well, how about the shitting? Do they want to shit in your mouth or they want you to shit in theirs?
They want, the second one. Yeah, usually the second one.
And what is so the first time you heard that, the first time someone looked you in the eye, you're standing with another human being in the room. And I know you're very permissive and open and all that stuff, but I don't know that you've ever confronted that in your personal, that's usually not something you do in junior high.
Because I had played so much with this guy, and we called him Doggy Bob, this guy who was into the farting.
Doggy
I had
Bob?
heard that for so much. Yeah, he was so sweet. And he was so sweet, and he liked being called like a good dog, and he liked barking. He was just such a sweet guy. So because I had heard him so much already talking about how he wanted to fart in our faces, I think I was just used to it by that point. Like that had acclimated me to it. So then when it moved on to somebody saying, I want you to shit in my mouth, then I was just like, okay, well, that's the next step.
Was your job to act turned on by that though? And you go,
no,
I want to shit in your mouth.
I was not turned on by it. No,
you're supposed to be disgusted.
But I was not disgusted. And I was kind of
I'm saying in your character. Like, is that client wanting you to be?
No,
yeah.
I think I was supposed to be. I think this client, it would depend on the individual client.
Okay.
And that was be tricky because they wouldn't always tell you. So you would have to kind of figure it out. But no, I think he wanted me to be excited about it. Like he wanted me to want to do it. Like to be like, you're so filthy.
You're so naughty. Yeah. I mean, how did you feel about that?
As a toilet.
Yeah. I mean, were there things that people asked you to do where you go like, this is hard for me to even fucking act like this is cool?
I mean, no, it wasn't. That one was not hard for me to act like it was cool. Cause I had seen, I think by that point I had seen enough people that I could understand why somebody would want that.
Why do you think?
I don't know that he actually wanted it. He just wanted to fantasize about it. And that, going back to my original point, is that I don't know if he had been able to express his BDSM desires earlier in life, like with real partners, or if he'd been able to play with humiliation on a lighter scale. I don't know that his fantasies would have progressed so far, but I think when you're just alone with your thoughts for so long, because he was an older person, then it's going to go to a more and more extreme place. So I could just see how it had brought him to that place. So
what do you think about
bother me?
So most people who want to, but there's also people who want to act that out, right? What do you think? Yes. Where do you think that comes from? Being the person who's seen who these people are, because it's something that's just kind of treated like a joke by most people, right?
Are you asking about bathroom stuff in particular, I think, there's humiliation is really wide ranging fetish that can have a lot of causes, but with bathroom stuff in particular, and any kind of guess I'm making about this, I'm generalizing it.
Okay, yeah, I just feel like you're on the front lines. You might from
childhood shame would be my guess, because especially anybody who had accidents as a child, like wet the bed or anything like that, and was shamed for it, or even if you didn't actually have them, but it's just like a joke in our culture,
right?
People feel a lot of shame about it, and then I think people who are into humiliation sometimes the biggest expression of humiliation really that you could think of is the dirtiest part of somebody else and you taking in that dirtiest part of them.
Yeah.
So if you think of like maybe the dirtiest part of somebody being the shit that's coming out of their asshole, and then you're dirty. So unworthy of that person that the most you can take from them is that, like, that's all you deserve.
Yeah.
It's a pretty dark feeling when you think about it that way. But I think some people that may be how they really feel about themselves deep down. And so they eroticize that, because a lot of time the things that we feel about ourselves that make us uncomfortable, we eroticize them because it's a way to deal with them. So it could be that.
I wish I had the confidence, even guys who have women eat their ass. I wish I had the confidence to go like, oh yeah, you can definitely stick your tongue back there. I'm clean. It blows me away how people can be so like, I mean, truly, I'm for it. I'm not shaming it. I'm just saying I'm so far from that. You know what I mean? So it's interesting to talk about and to hear your perspective on. What do you think about whenever people indulge fantasy, right? And I've been on this side of this in many ways and many times. I can even relate it to using drugs, right? If you start getting into stuff and there's a point where you let yourself go, right? Where like, you're like, hey, everything's cool. Like, hey, it makes me feel good. I'm going to fucking do it. And I'm not going to feel bad, especially when there's outward shame on it. That was a big thing in my life as a drug person. There's so much shame on it. I started using heroin. You're just like, oh, I'm going to do it fucking openly. I'm not even gonna I'm not gonna be ashamed. And now looking back at it, I see that as really like unhealthy for me, obviously, right? Like I was being immature and wild and stuff. Are there any aspects of this where the fantasizing to you gets too far or gets damaging to you?
That's a good question.
Every now and then I get lucky.
I want to say no, because I feel like you can't control your fantasies. So to say that it's going too far is not going to stop you from thinking the thing. It's just going to make you feel shame about thinking the thing, if that makes sense.
But do you think, so we had a therapist on who talked about pedophilia stuff. And
yeah, that's what I was going to get at. I mean, that's definitely, you certainly should not actually do that for sure. We did have people come to the dungeon who were clearly into that. And there were a lot of women who would just not play with them. But those of us who did, the idea we had was, well, it's better that they do it with us than with, an actual child. And hopefully they're not doing it with an actual child.
We had this therapist.
You got to do it.
Yeah, so this therapist knocked me out on this because she actually brought it to my attention. She's like, because there are child fuck dolls, right? I'm trying to put that delicately. And I was like, well, yeah, they get it out there rather than the kid. That's a lot better. And she just said, basically like, no, you're revving up their, their fantasy. And it made me think of when I watched the movie Blow, for instance. And I don't watch that movie and go, I used to do drugs. It's like, oh, fuck, I'm ready to go back. Like in it. Yeah. So it was sort of like profound to me. Yeah.
I would say that for one thing, though, I don't know. I don't know what the dolls are like, but if they're doing it at the dungeon, we're obviously not kids. And we obviously have adult bodies. So in that way, it maybe is a little different. But you're right. It is tricky. It is iffy. And
I'm not saying I'm right or whatever. You know what I mean? I'm just telling you my experience, what I heard and all that. So what is, because I shared your mindset 100%, truly.
Yeah.
And you're in there doing a fantasy job. And we have a sex worker podcast that we do. And I got into a thing with them about age play, as they call it. Right. And I wasn't arguing. I was just, we were starting to talk about it, and it is very complex. How often would age play stuff happen?
I mean, it was a lot. It would happen a lot because there were many different forms of it that could happen. Some of my craziest sessions, we would actually do infant play. There are people who wanted to pretend to be babies, and they would come in with diapers. And then sometimes they would want you to be the baby and wear the diaper. And then the bathroom stuff came into that too. So there was that. And that, I mean, that's
would you change a man's diaper?
Yep. I have changed a baby's diaper when I'm babysitting, but that was coming through my mind. Like, as an adult woman, I'm changing a diaper, but it's not my child. I did not imagine that this was ever what I was going to be doing with my life. But
what else would so I have a thing with that. If there's one thing that I have to admit judgment for, and it is totally because there's an HBO Real Sex thing years ago about infantilism or whatever I think they call it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And watching the 40-year-old man put a fucking bonnet on and go, mama, papa. And then the wife was changing his diapers. And I want to support you, bro. But that is so fucking pathetic to me for some reason. And I don't even want to say pathetic. I'm so sorry. But that's my real feeling when I saw that. And it's just like, oh my God, to play along. Would they shit in the diaper when they do it?
I understand what, no, what was the last thing you said?
I'm not right, by the way. Like, I'm not saying I'm right and whatever. I'm just saying I try to be honest with my thoughts on this shit. Yeah. And that's the one that I struggle with. I got to admit.
I struggle with it too. I mean, so what happened is, like, especially when I first started at the dungeon and I didn't do sessions like that right away, because they were a little rarer, I would have thought that is so weird.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. But by the time that I did do it, I had been there a long time, and the first person that I did it with, he was just such a sweet guy, and he was so like obsessed with it in a cute way. Like, he actually collected old diapers, like not used diaper, but like diapers so that like disposable diapers, but brands that aren't made anymore. And he had like his own diaper bag, and it's just it was very
his own diaper bag,
but it was just
is it
fancy
weird?
One, and he had all kinds of stuff. So.
Is it weird to watch them transform, to be like, I'm walking in, I'm a business executive, and hey, darling, how are you doing? And then, mama, or whatever. You know what I mean?
Some of them, Yes, that would be very weird. Some of them, it was more extreme than others. Like this person who, the diaper person, he came in, like he was just kind of wearing a t-shirt and very casual and young. He was very young, actually. And
Wow.
he kind of
That
stayed
shocks
in,
me for some reason.
yeah, and he stayed in like that same kind of character throughout. And but then we would have that big transformation. There would be people who came in their business suits, and they were obviously very powerful men, and then they wanted to do cross-dressing. So they
Would
were
they
doing
ever
something completely different.
would they ever throw a tantrum like a real kid where it would like annoy you? Like, oh, God damn it.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Really?
But yeah.
Please
I mean,
tell some of those stories. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think of how. I mean, I don't know if you mean like
Like where they
in
throw
the terms of
themselves
a
on the
role play.
floor and fucking cry, or, you know, like I have young children. Every now and then,
Oh.
like in the morning, you're like, get your fucking boots on. Like, yeah, and they act like they can't. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that was one of the role plays we would do, like with tantrum, like they didn't want to wear the diaper, and you had to fight them into wearing the diaper and something like that. But
wow.
what I thought you meant was like more in an adult context. They would kind of throw their little tantrums if some of them were very much kind of like. Some of the submissive guys were very much topping from the bottom, if you've heard that term before.
Yeah.
They knew exactly what they wanted, and they wanted it exactly the way they wanted it. And if you weren't doing it exactly right, they would let you know.
Right. Well, hey, they're fucking paying the money, right? I mean, in a sense.
Yes.
Would they ever break character and be like, God damn it, I don't know. Yeah.
Oh yeah, all the time. And then, I mean, they would complain about things that they knew were against the rule, but they wanted to do it anyway. Or they would be like, but all the other girls do it. All the other girls take their underwear off. That was the big one. They would always say that.
Scheming motherfuckers.
Yeah.
So yeah, what, God, I'm sorry. This is all so fucking interesting. It's hard for me to stay on track, but, what were we talking about? The thing. Yeah. Just the more extreme requests, I guess.
Yeah. Is that what we were
I'm sorry.
about?
Age play. It was age play stuff.
Oh, age play.
So guys, so in that regard, I'm meaning more. So this is my thing with age play. People say age play, but I don't imagine there's many men who came in there and wanted you to act like some fucking old lady, right?
No, but
Right.
there were
Who wants you to be a child?
there were guys who wanted to be a little boy, and they wanted you to be like their mom.
Yes, and I get that.
Not an old lady, but a mom. Yeah.
Okay.
I would say maybe like a 40-something mom tops, not an old lady.
What were the things that you struggled with when you started?
Well, so actually, when you were talking about the way that you see the diaper guys or the infantilism, I felt that way at the beginning. One thing I really struggled with, and you're going to think this is so silly, is tickling. I thought that because I had no idea that tickling was a fetish, like, or a part of BDSM, because I had sort of been really obsessed with the more extreme parts of it, like the pain, the sadomasochism, the control. And I, at the beginning, and now I feel bad because now I got to know a lot of these guys and became friendly with them. But at the beginning I was like, you're kidding me. You want to pay all this money just to tickle me? You just want to tickle me? That's so...
They want to tickle you?
It was pathetic.
Yeah, I would have thought it was the other way around, where you would have to tickle them.
So at the very beginning, I was just kind of like, oh, that's not real BDSM. I was very disappointed with the tickling, but I got over that pretty quickly because I had some clients who told me how their tickling fetishes had developed. Like they had a girl they were friends with little kids, and they tickled each other and play fought, and a lot of times tickling was combined with bondage. So what would be exciting was tickling with somebody while they were tied down. So
that is some childish shit, though.
I get that. Yeah.
Like on its surface, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
just on its surface. Yeah. Sorry.
At first I just thought tickling was kind of boring, and I was just like, why? I didn't think it was a very masculine fetish, like for a dominant guy.
It's not.
It's
one of
It's not at all.
And then, it's funny. We had because I started working there in 2013, and I was still thinking things like this, like I want it. And I still kind of do, but now that's not really a cool thing to say anymore. Like, cause we're really expanding our idea of what gender is, which is great. But at the time, 50 Shades was really popular still back then. And not that I liked 50 Shades, but there was this idea that like a dominant man was a very masculine man. And I was like, tickling her, really?
Yeah, that's
But
not. I mean, would those guys come?
Some of them, yeah.
So like they're tickling you and they go, and then they like, I mean, for real?
Yeah.
Oh, can the
Yes.
clients have their dicks out, by the way?
So, okay, so this is a complicated thing. So because we're not providing sexual services, they're not really allowed to masturbate or to be fully nude, but then we do cock and ball torture. So for that, they do have to have their dicks out. So like
But they
that's
just gotta
kind
have
of an
socks
exception.
on, though.
Well, yeah.
So they have to have some tape over the hole at
so
the end.
basically, if we're interacting with their cock and balls, it has to be because we're providing pain and not pleasure. Is kind of the rule there. So
But
if
don't
the
they
guy
like
is
the
dominant,
pain?
yeah, so that's where it gets tricky, because if they did like the pain and then that causes them to have a physical reaction, then we can't really control that reaction. Was kind of the if that makes sense. That was kind of the reasoning behind it. So we're not gonna help them masturbate.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if they're having a reaction that's with their own body, they're having that reaction with their own body. And so basically, but with the dominant men, if we weren't doing CBT on them, if they were in the dominant role, then they had to keep their underpants on. But
they fucking rub it against you. I mean, it sticks out.
People still had the reactions they were going to have. We just couldn't help them have them.
And I'm sure that they had ways to skirt
Yes.
it or push it where like they, just, going from my wild imagination, you have a boner and the woman's tied up and you start kind of running it on the inside of her fucking thigh. And yeah, absolutely. It's called I'm the hot dog, you're the bun. Come on, baby, let's have some fun.
We had a bathroom in every room. So.
But I don't imagine they went and came in there.
Some of them.
Excuse me. Excuse me one moment. I'm going.
And there were showers. There was everything. So
the age play, back to that, when they wanted you to be a little girl, would you struggle with that aspect? And how little of a girl would they want you to be?
So there was really only one that I could think of that wanted me to be a really little girl, like younger than a teenager. And that was a creepy session. Everybody would agree that was a creepy session. That was a guy who
everyone who was there would agree that was fucking creepy when he wanted to fuck me as a 6-year-old.
All that he did. Let me go. He was wow, this guy, and he was one who was always trying to break all the rules, and he would only see basically very new submissives because he knew that they were the only ones who would see him. Like once you'd seen him a couple times,
I wear some motherfuckers
then
out.
you would just be like, no more, because he was so it was two things. So he wanted to be the daddy and he wanted you to be the little girl. And then he also at the same time had a fetish for horse sex. So he also wanted to teach you how to have sex with a horse.
Do you have to charge more for multiple fantasies in one session?
No.
I feel like you got to charge double.
You owe me $1,000, motherfucker, for letting me hear that.
We were just talking about it. We couldn't actually do it.
You don't bring Mr. Ed in to finish it off?
How intense was he?
Well, one time we had gags. So one time he found a gag that was kind of like, I don't know, it wasn't cock shaped, but it was big. So he wanted to like pretend that that gag was the horse's cock. So that was
people would bring in their own props like that.
No, it was a dungeon prop.
Okay,
we had props. Yeah.
Were there ever? So in that situation, how intense is his demeanor, and how fucking crazy, by the way, that to ask you, what was the specific age that he wanted you to be?
Oh, I'm sure they wouldn't say. Yeah, okay. They wouldn't say. No, because I mean, just because it's so creepy, but it was very clearly young. It was like, like using infantile terms.
That's
like
what I'm saying.
Daddy and mommy. And
how did he let you know how, like how young to be? He asked you to say what?
Well, he would say like,
call me daddy.
He say like, yeah, they would say, call me daddy, but I'm trying to think how you knew. It was just pretty obvious. He would say things like,
would it be in his description of
you're a bit like things like, oh, you're a big enough girl to go to school by yourself or something like that. Like you have to be pretty, like you're going to go to school by yourself for the first time or something. Yeah.
Imagine that dude. So, obviously you can't out this dude and you wouldn't and all that. I'm just trying to say, like, what is the profile of this guy? Like, is this the typical powerful CEO type guy? Or is this more like
this
the FBI should be watching
this guy,
him?
It was one of the creepiest ones, I would say, by far. Because he would come in and he would act super nice. Like, he almost had like a Mr. Rogers type demeanor when he came in.
Holy shit.
Like, like very nice. And I think he would usually wear like a polo shirt and
he'd have his like sweatshirt tucked into his khakis with no belt. Yeah.
And he had like a slight, like maybe kind of like Midwestern accent or something. He just very much like normal, nice, slightly conservative guy, but you could just tell that it was an act.
Oh.
But this was not. This was
act
not
like
our
a little fucking
client.
kid, Oh, that's Canadian.
Yeah,
but
this was not our typical client. This was just one of those.
He was like a gray man, like sort of has that.
Maybe.
Yeah. So what after those sessions, and what are the things that guy? So in that session, for instance, and I'm sorry to get so detailed here because I'm revving up some other fucking pervert somewhere. but when they're doing that, and he's saying you're big enough to go to school now. He wants you to play that, and then I'm sure he brandishes his dick. Although it's or whatever. Like, how does that fantasy play out?
He would sit. So he also wanted you to be a horse. So that was another part of it. So he would like have you get on all fours, and then he would say, "I'm going to ride you like a horse." So then he would get on you, like in his boxers.
You'd sit on your back.
Yes. Yeah. And that was really technically like
woman.
very, very close to breaking the dungeon rules, which is why he would only play with new girls. And like after 2 or 3 sessions, pretty much everyone would be like, I'm not going to see you anymore.
Did you ever feel
that's what he would do?
Like, would you feel malice or hatred in any of these people where it would shut you off?
Not with him. I don't know why. Maybe because that was such a disturbing session that I had to shut it off before even it started. There were a couple, was one session that I was really angry but it's more serious story. So I don't know if we want to wait till later.
No, I mean, we can do that. That's fine. I mean, we just talked about fucking pedophilia type shit. So, I mean, yeah.
Well, one that I was very angry with was it was a female client, which is really rare, but she was like a female dominant, and she would come in sometimes. She would come in with like her male submissive actually and play. She would bring him in and then they would play with girls. But what she did
were they a couple, would you say?
Yeah, they were a couple. Yeah.
Okay.
So for one thing, because she was a woman, I think I had like trust with her. So then it really hurt more that she broke it. But what she did was she had me tied up, and then she took a knife out, which you're not supposed to have a knife in the dungeon. That should be obvious. So she took a knife out and like started running it across my flesh while I was naked and tied up. And I just was like completely freaked out, like completely like had a sobbing, shuddering breakdown.
What was she saying?
What was she saying or what was I saying?
No, what was she saying? Was she threatening
saying anything.
you?
Like I couldn't talk. From what I remember, she wasn't saying anything either. She was just doing it. I don't think she was saying anything, but if she was, I don't remember. Because it was like a pretty traumatic moment for me. Yeah. And then when it was over, I told the desk mistress what had happened, and I was really upset. And then she was just like, "Oh, it was just a fake knife." So I guess it was a fake knife. I don't know. It felt real to me, to be honest. And if she didn't warn me that she had one or that she was going to pretend to do that, there was no reason for me to not think, I couldn't see it that well from the way I was tied up. Like I assumed it was real. So that was one that really made me angry.
So that's so something that I was going to bring up sort of earlier in this, but is there's I don't want to give too much away, but I got asked to be in a film, and it was someone who knew me from comedy, who was involved in the comedy world, and who I really liked, thought she's cool, and she asked me to be in this film, and it was about BDSM type stuff because whatever. I don't want to give too much away, but anyway, I was asked out to this thing, and in my mind, I'm going, well, I'm a comedian. They clearly asked me to do it for comedy. So I thought, I thought it'd be like a dark HBO type where you play it straight comedy. It's not like I thought it was going to be slapstick. But I got there and the person wasn't there. It was just one person in this industrial type thing, and they wanted me to put on a G-string and a mask and be tied up, and then the person was coming, right? And I'm kind of like, just, it's uncomfortable right away. And then, but I do it because it was someone who I, had faith in, and did it. And it was extremely, like, I was shocked at how vulnerable I felt to be tied up because I was in the St. Andrew's Cross position. And I'm just going like, this doesn't feel like a comedy video. And, and the woman came, and she was very attractive, by the way, and had done Dom stuff and started to do it on me. And it was very weird. Not my thing, but it makes me understand how it's like the second you're tied into that thing, you are ultra vulnerable, and you are someone's decision away from having something really bad happen. So how do you get there that you're comfortable with that? Because people are coming in to do those things. You're putting yourself right in the crosshairs of people who, it's very easy that someone might do something fucked up, I guess.
Yeah, and people did do fucked up things, like people would pull your underwear off while you were tied up and stuff like that. So, or they would hit you harder or purposefully in the wrong place. So it definitely did happen. I mean, part of it is just that I think you have to be the kind of person who is really, really had those fantasies for a long time, and you really desired it like enough that you're willing to put up with that. But also, I think that actually, in a weird way, it's actually safer to do it in a dungeon than it would be, even if you're doing it with a partner that you like outside of a dungeon. Because in the dungeon, there's people, in the building. So like, even if you were doing it with a partner, but maybe they were an abusive partner or something, like you could be in more danger outside of the dungeon, but there's always other people in the building and they know where you are. And there's like a panic button. Now, of course, if you're tied up, you can't.
Yeah, unless it's in your mouth.
Button,
right.
But it is there. And most of the clients have been coming to the dungeon for a long time, and they know the rules, and they know that if they break the rules, then they're going to be asked, not to come back. So generally, nothing too bad is going to happen. And then, we did have gags, but we were recommended not to wear a gag with like a client we didn't know. And even with some gags, you can make noise. So yes, like people would scream as part of session. Yeah. Like you might scream, help me. Like if you were doing a role play where you were being kidnapped. But I think there's like a different, like, I think if somebody had really been in a situation of extreme danger, and that never happened when I was there, but I think you can tell the difference that if they were doing that for long enough, somebody would have heard come up there right away. So there was always like that kind of sense that, and then if enough time passed that your session was over, they would always check on you the minute your session ended. So if you couldn't answer and tell them you were okay, like immediately, then they would definitely come up right away and check on you. And so at the most you would have like you might have an hour if something bad happened right at the beginning of your session, but that would be very, very rare.
Fucking time,
no, but that never happens.
And then, so I have a couple questions on this then. So first of all, is that, like, obviously that's the charge for you, right? Is that you are so vulnerable and that anything bad could happen. And that's what brings you to it. Would you, we did an episode some time ago that I believe you listened to that was about consensual non-consent, which really blew me away. But I, really love the episode, and anyone who likes this one should listen to that one. But one of the things that really struck me, I suppose, is that our bodies get wired in a way that you can, I would like to think that when I orgasm, I'm in control of why, right?
Yeah.
Do you orgasm at these appointments or orgasm at things that you don't necessarily like, but you still get that charge? In a sense?
Definitely. I mean, I didn't orgasm a lot at the dungeon, but like if I got turned on at the dungeon sometimes, and I would get sometimes turned on by things that I did not like, or with people that I did not like. And I think that happens. And like,
that must be so confusing. Like someone who you're repulsed by. Like, I mean, would it ever be that? Like, I mean, someone who you're really not attracted to?
Yes. And if they were doing something that I was turned on by, or I would even, because like from the time I was very young, I had a lot of fantasies about like being kidnapped and like hurt and then getting rescued. And it was all like part of the same fantasy. So, you know, in my head, maybe I was in the part where I was getting kidnapped and hurt and then I was going to get rescued. So
can you
as weird
share
as that sounds?
Like, can you share a specific example of that?
I mean,
like, you know, of one that turned you on?
That's about as specific as it got. Cause I didn't well, I've actually never shared this one before, but I think because I listened to the rape episode, I feel like more comfortable sharing this. So I had a like repeated fantasy like throughout high school. And I think it was kind of like more of a fantasy about escaping from real life than anything else. So I just would have this fantasy that I got kidnapped by like this group of guys, and I didn't really give them specific faces or anything aside from the fact that they were probably all attractive and clean and smelled good, which made it totally unrealistic. Right. They were probably like college students. I don't know. But like,
yeah, those aren't the guys who have to resort to kidnapping, right?
Yeah, they would just like keep me in their basement, like just tied up in their basement, like forever. And then just like come down and like beat me up and then have their way with me. And just this would go on for a long time. And this was obviously not something that I actually wanted to happen, which was, it was very confusing at these fantasies because I was like, I know I don't actually want this to happen, but this really turns me on to think about this. And then in that one, sometimes I would get rescued, but sometimes it wasn't even rescued. It was just that one of them was like really nice and caring and would like take care of me after.
Would do some post care or whatever. So aftercare. What?
Yeah, I would do aftercare. Yeah.
Yeah. What? So were you raped? Like, you know, what brought you to this? Sorry to ask that. So crazy.
No, I know that was probably coming. So I never was raped. And I know in that episode that she said that like happens to people because they were raped. And I can see that that's totally true. And that's probably usually what it is. And when I first really kind of understood my fantasies and tried to figure out why I had these fantasies, I thought I probably had been sexually abused and like repressed or something. And I was really trying to figure out what had happened, but I don't think I ever was. And I think that when you're a little kid, just any kind of experience where you feel like you're not in control of your surroundings, even if it's not sexual, it can just, that feeling can just kind of mess up your head a little. So I just basically, I had a really caring, loving parents and a financially stable, safe childhood. Like I was never in any kind of danger, but I did have, when I was 3, I had like a baby sister was born and then died just a couple months after that. And then I think both of my parents, but especially my mom, had really pretty severe depression after that. And they already sort of had kind of family issues of their own. And I was the first child. So there was just a lot of like precariousness. And I think that it wasn't dealt with, like there were no therapists, so I think that I felt unsafe, like psychologically. And I don't think it was anybody's fault. Like it was not intentional or at all. But like I didn't feel like I was able to like express my true feelings because I was afraid of like being abandoned or hurt. I think I felt like I had to take care of my parents. And not
that's what I was going to say. Like also that there's pressure on you to not cause them more pain, probably.
Yes,
I would imagine. So I can see that. I mean, that actually makes a lot of sense to me in a way, right?
Yeah. So why it became so sexual, who knows? I don't know. I mean, that's just, human brains are weird, you know?
Were you, and I mean this word in the kindest, most pedestalized way. Were you a slut in high school?
No, I was the opposite. I was very, very, so I was like borderline anorexic in high school. Like I was such a control freak. So I was like I didn't get my period. And I was like really, like I didn't have breasts. I don't know. That doesn't have anything. You can still be a breast slut. But like, I just like, I was very, serious and very focused on my studies. I didn't go on a lot of dates. I didn't lose my virginity till I was 20. So, but I had a lot of really weird fantasies, like really dark
early
fantasies.
on.
And I think that's part of the reasons why I wasn't like as sexually active, because it still is kind of hard for me sometimes to be more sexual in like more of a vanilla context, because I do like feel way more comfortable if I'm in the submissive role. And that's not really something that happens that young in high school. I mean, it does for some people, but you know, most people in high school are not like, oh, can you tie me up and pretend to rape me or whatever.
So 100%, one of the things that I was going to ask is, how does a fella out there who had, like, I mean, even thinking, I have even some sympathy for the dudes who have these fantasies, because how do you let a girl know, like, God, I'd like to beat the fucking shit out of you, or, you know, like, I'd love to trample you, I'd love to slap, you know, how do you bring that?
Well, the funny and
it's hard for me to talk dirty.
Is, like, some of the more extreme fantasies that I had, like, they were never something that a guy would have asked me, can I do this? Like, I had to bring them up, like the trampling. Like I told a couple people, like, there were a couple things like that, like trampling and then being spit on. Like, I don't think any guy's gonna be like, can I spit on you? But I was like, I told them I liked it. So
I was watching a porn where the woman spit on the guy's cock. And I got to tell you, back where I'm from, that's an insult.
Yeah,
that's just a stupid joke.
But I can actually see it making. I can actually see it making more sense. Like,
it makes a lot of sense.
Genitals, okay, because people are already
it makes a lot of sense.
Doing things with their mouths in that area, but like being spit like in your face or something like that's pretty.
It's
extreme.
Disgusting. But
it's disgusting.
How does the? But I get that. That's why it's hot. Believe me. Believe me. I understand that. What? To go back to the trampling. How do you? When did your first fantasy come about where you go like, God, I'd like someone to fucking
I don't remember. I mean, I don't remember. I think it was always part of like, I think whenever I had these like, and I don't have, and after I started working at the dungeon, I don't have as much of the extreme fantasies as I used to. And like, they're not things that I would want to have happen, but I think I would always imagine somebody like really throwing me down roughly, like, so that I like really landed hard on the ground. And so I think trampling was kind of like that same idea of just being like pushed into the ground, like on your stomach and then having that weight on you. I think it's just like a really powerless position to be in. So that's where that came from.
I've looked at some Tom from Finland pictures and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of stepping on dicks and all that. So I get that that's a deep seated thing. Like, and I get humiliation and all that. I'm not trying to act totally naive to this, but I guess you used the word trampled and it really stuck out to me.
Well, because I think it's pretty common fetish for guys to want to be trampled, but it's not as common for women. Oh, it's definitely very common at the dungeon. It was something a lot of guys would ask for.
You know what? You're right. I've seen pictures of those like Taschen books where a woman, there's one that stuck out to me where a woman had a really high heel and she was stuffing cake into this guy's mouth. Like, with the heel. Yeah. So what sort of trampling stuff did you do and have done?
I mean, well, a lot of guys wanted their dick in their balls. Like they wanted you to put put your stiletto heel and kind of dig in. So we would do that. Yeah. Or
would they
just
again, I hate to ask this again, but would they come when you are putting the stiletto to it?
I don't think I think that might have been like
spurt out both sides.
Physiologically impossible.
I suppose. I mean, if you're doing it right.
That ever happening.
Yeah. But what, my God.
And with you get a guy like that in, do you get anybody that's like on the fence? Because earlier you said you had a guy that didn't know what he liked, where somebody goes, "Oh yeah, I want you to trample me," and then you start trampling on him, and he's like, "Oh
no, not that
pineapple science. This is gonna hurt this."
Not with that.
Not that, you crazy bitch! What the fuck are you doing? Yeah,
he's like, I got to use those later,
right?
And you would think that would because there would be guys who would come in and would be nervous and would be like, "I don't know if I'll like this." Like I fantasized about it, but my experience is if you fantasized about something, you probably actually do like it. Usually. So I never experienced that. But where that would happen was with the bathroom stuff, actually. Like the guy who liked to talk about the farting. Like I heard that once one girl actually did fart in his face and he didn't like it. He just wanted to talk about it.
You stinky. Yuck.
Yeah.
So when, where I think of this job being scary or like, like, listen, I have a daughter. I hate always bringing shit back to that thing, but I'd like her to be very open sexually. That is so fucking weird to say. I wish I hadn't said that, but whatever. Healthy, happy, all that shit, right? Like I'm not trying to yuck somebody's yum, as they say. But I gotta say, it's scary to think if that's the route she took, which is your route, because I'd be so scared of the people who are like, the people are with you that they don't really value you. And I know that they act like they do. And some really do.
Well, some of them act like they don't.
Right. Okay. And then to see them doing
very clear.
Like, I get the really scary one with the knife thing, but what's really insidious to me is the guys who are always doing the little extra thing, right? Like, a little whack to the fucking ribs, that that you have a bruise, and where you see the real anger and hate in their face as they do it.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of guys that you can tell that they really hate women. I mean, it's nobody would want their daughter to have this job.
Okay.
I feel like for me, I mean, maybe somebody would, but
how would you feel about it?
And if I had it, I mean, I don't know that I was ever going to have kids. But
that's the shit you've seen. I don't blame you.
The same way that I feel like about myself is like knowing my personality. I always knew I was going to do something like this. So it's like you can't change your nature. You know what I mean? And I was a lot unhappier before I had done it. And definitely there are things about it that damaged me, and there are parts of me that are like more distrustful, and for sure, and probably would fall in love a lot less easily at this point. And there were times while I was working at the dungeon or right after that, I didn't want to be with anybody sexually outside of work. So it can definitely do that to you. You just want to be alone. Definitely. And I'm also a loner to begin with. So
I can't make friends telling me I want to be trampled. What do you see as far like, oh man, do you, sorry, I got stuck here, but I was trying to think about okay. You were talking about, that's you can't change who you are and all that stuff. And my view on it as a 42-year-old man who looks back at, I've been a lot of different people through my life. Mm-hmm. Right. And
that is a simplistic, you can certainly change some things about who you are, but I don't think you can change, like, I don't think I could get rid of the part of me that wants to be submissive. Like,
no, right. And by the way, I don't want you to, I'm just trying to say that amping up those things or doing the extreme things, like, what you've said yourself is when you're in that job, I'm sure things got more extreme. Right. And now looking back at that, how do you view, because, I was talking about this episode today, and I thought if someone, and I'm sure people did approach me when I was a 25-year-old heroin addict and said, hey man, like fucking heroin shit, like you shouldn't do that or whatever. And there would have been no telling me it, it would have been like, look, it's vilified. It's overdone. Like, fuck you. I'm fine. You can't change who I am. I'm a and now I look at, I look back at it as so childish in a way.
Yeah.
Do you have any aspects of that? Because I know there's tremendous pressure in this community to accept everything.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's actually not though. Like there's a lot of wariness against abuse. And, especially post 50 Shades, because so many aspects of 50 Shades or so many aspects of BDSM got a bad rap because of that. Like abuse was
fucking
normalized.
vanilla
so
down too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is like a push to not normalize abuse, and there's a lot of like emphasis on the safe, sane, and consensual, and the submissive is always in control. Aftercare, all that stuff. I forgot what the original question was.
Oh, who fucking knows? Just keep going, baby. No, I think I was just asking about like the fluid nature of who you are changes, right?
So, I think what I was going to say though is that I don't know that the way that I approached this job was the healthiest way, and I also don't think it's the way that most people approach it. So I should emphasize that there are much healthier ways to come into this job.
How's it different? Like, how did you come in?
Especially when I started, I really just truly submitted in way more sessions than I should have. And I just was very open, and just like probably just gave more myself than I should have. Like it really is best if you can, play a role, which I certainly had to at points and at time. And as I went further along, I did more and more, especially when I was doming, because I don't consider myself a dom. So anytime I was doming, I was playing a role. But obviously with somebody like the guy who wants you to be a little girl or to wear diapers there, I was playing a role. But if it was like somebody who wanted to tie me up or spank me, I was usually not playing a role. Like I was really submitting and really enjoying it. And I would try not to go into full subspace. We haven't really talked. I don't know if people know what subspace is, but that's like what we were talking about earlier with the endorphin high, where you kind of feel like you're high.
Give into
really,
it.
You should never go into subspace if you're working. in a professional context, but I did let myself do that.
It's so much hotter when you let yourself do it, though. Like, I mean, for real,
Yeah.
I'm sure the person can feel it.
I certainly wasn't the only one. Yeah, I certainly wasn't the only one. And also at times it would really be impossible not to, if the person is a really skilled dom and they're really hitting you hard and doing it correctly, it would be almost impossible not to, but you should try not to. And I did let myself go too far. At times I did not have good boundaries when I started, but then
what's an example of that, of letting things go too far?
Not, like just letting people continue to hit me way too hard when there was no reason for it, especially if they were not paying for a heavy session. If I could tell that they were hitting me hard enough to bruise me and they kept out doing it for a long time, I just said, like, you need to back off. We need to take a break. And then I would let people tie me up who I knew, because they done it before, were going to like grab my pussy once I was tied up, and I would still play with them again, even though I knew they were going to do that.
Going to do what to your pussy? I'm sorry, the sound sort of
grab it.
Okay, grab it. Yeah. Did you ever just give in and fuck somebody?
No, because that would have been truthful? Like, well, yeah, I am, because it was just, there was no, like, that would have been,
I think that'd be so hard not to.
If they had, no, it was not hard. Like, like even if you were into it, most of these guys, it wasn't somebody that you would want to.
Because of, okay. Usually. Well, and like,
so there were a lot of older gentlemen, to be honest.
Hey, hey, you whippersnapper. Some of us
older, like, well, like my oldest client ever, I think, was probably like in his late 80s.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Would they put on the dom shit? Like, I mean, would they put on the leather and the hood and or whatever?
Oh, no. Hardly anybody.
He takes his teeth out of the glass and says, "I'm really going to give it to you today."
Yeah. But really more because the owner of the dungeon was very, very serious about the rules, and that this was not a place for prostitution or a place for that stuff.
Right.
And a lot of the women who worked there were very serious about it. So if you had done something like that and you got caught, like, you would have both been fired, and like all the women there would have hated you, and they were all like my friends. So I didn't want that. And it just would have felt really weird, because it's like, there you can hear. So when you're in one room, you can hear what's going on in the next room.
Okay.
So yeah.
Do you ever
because of that?
Sorry. Were there ever clients where you just, whether you liked their looks or not, where they were so good at it or you clicked with them, where it began to feel like an affair or a romance, where like you really look forward to them?
That I kind of regret, because he was really young and really sweet, and I had like a huge crush on him, and I could tell that he kind of wanted to date me, but there was a rule against that. And he was very like good about following the rules, so he had not asked for a long time. But then I could tell he was gonna ask. I think he actually did ask me out once, but by that point, like, I had met my boyfriend, and I was with my boyfriend, and I was just. But I do kind of regret sometimes that I didn't date him, because then he actually stopped coming to the dungeon, which was a good thing, because he was very young.
Yeah,
he was young, and he needed to like go have his life and not be spending all his money at the dungeon. But so he stopped coming, and I was kind of like, I wish I had just dated him. He was very nice. But he was pretty much the only one.
And was there not any like a secondary market where you go, hey, I'm out here to meet the dudes, and then I get paid real fucking money because I go to their house and
not very often, just because like
the risk of losing your job.
A lot of them were married, so they didn't want that to happen. Like, they didn't want it to be anywhere outside of the dungeon. Like, yeah, you could go to a hotel, but the hotel didn't have all the dungeon equipment that you could use. But there were there was one woman who worked there who ended up marrying a client, because that was why she came to work at the dungeon. She was looking for a
full-time dom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was just looking for a sugar daddy that made it truly serious. So that could happen, but it wasn't super likely, because it was just as easy and safe to do it in the dungeon. And the equipment, really, like, the guys who wanted to play with all the equipment that we had, so we had tons of really expensive toys and the furniture and all that stuff that cost that would cost thousands of dollars. So it wouldn't be practical to try to do that on your own, really.
So I've got 10 more questions. We haven't even covered close to everything that I planned, but we're at an hour and a half.
Wow. It feels like we've barely talked about anything.
We haven't. We truly haven't. But I think it'd be a good time to possibly break and then do a part 2 if you'd like to, whether it's next week or whether it's tomorrow, whenever you'd like, basically. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, for sure. Tomorrow is not great.
But I mean, we can do it next week at the same time if you'd like. That works for us, but we can talk about that.
I'll have to double check for sure, but it should work. Okay.
Well, Stephanie Parent, I want to promote her stuff real quick before we get out of here. Tevin, I know we have like her Twitter handle and her Patreon as well, so we'll put that on screen. So on Twitter, you can find her at here it comes. Yep. At SC_parent. Parent is a funny last name to have for these things, by the way.
It really is.
And her Patreon is
boom boom. Patreon.com/Stephanie P.
Yeah. So please go on. And what kind of stuff happens on the Patreon?
So I do want to say that on the Twitter these days, I don't normally talk about the sex work. Not that I'm not open about it, but just because like I stopped doing it for the pandemic. So it wasn't really organic to be like, oh, today I did this or that. But what I do there is like any links to stuff I publish. So like I have a new piece coming out that has to do with the dungeon on December 5th. So I'll put a link to that. So any kind of links are there and all the links to my website and stuff. But on the Patreon right now, and it's fairly new, it's basically just me telling the dungeon story from the beginning. So it's very detailed. Like I've been doing it for a couple months, I think, and I'm really only up to my first couple weeks I've been at the dungeon. So it's that. And then I also have voice recordings of it. But I am open to doing different things if people want different things, because it's an interactive platform. So
yeah, if someone wants a video or something, you never know, right?
Well,
if they pay enough.
Yeah, but there's not going to be like nude stuff because it is under my real name. So I do want to say that. Like if people, it's not going to be like sexual content.
If you want that kind of content, go to patreon.com/profession confession podcast.
Yeah, there's a whole nother
where I can be bought. I would especially like to do humiliation if like a gay guy masturbating, where I just have my shirt off and go like, "You homosexual! Oh my god, again!" That's all. But anyway, I was thinking. But some extra money.
So there's a lot of writing like that goes into detail, and then I've been reading some stuff out loud too, and like having an audio, and I've been doing questions and answers. So I'm really open to question and answers, and then if people want other things that are not there, they can give me ideas. So if you do join the Patreon and you don't like it, you can always cancel, or you can just join for 1 month.
Yeah, you can do 1 month donation.
It's not like a big. Yeah, it's just basically a donation that's going to help give me more time to write, so that I can write my books.
Do you want to do like, is there a vocal, like, a way that you can kind of talk to the people? I'm trying to think. So like we had the Dom lady on once and she was, she would slip into it. And I just thought maybe if you want to make some of my listeners come, you could say something right now.
Right. Or like those, it's like those, what are all the famous people doing where it's like the cameos where you can pay them to say happy birthday to you. You can do like the same thing, except you humiliate them and you'll send them a voice recording.
Or let them humiliate you.
I can do on the Patreon if people wanted me to do like, and I think I can also, because I can give people, you can private message people. So if somebody had like a request for me to tell them something private or to record something private, I could do that.
Oh yeah, just sexy chat.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can get a boner just texting people for real.
Yeah.
My text app is my biggest erogenous zone.
Yeah. For sure.
Did I give away too much? This podcast has been sponsored by Big Johnson t-shirts, by the way. They say the bigger the pod, the bigger the rod. Big Johnson. So go support Big Johnson t-shirts. Do they have those where you're from? Big Johnson?
Me?
Yeah. Do you remember those?
So no.
You're too young? It's a joke, actually, but it's just I don't even think Tevin knows about it. It's from the late 80s, early 90s.
Nope.
There were these Big Johnson t-shirts where it was all about having a big dick. Big Johnson. So anyway, thank you, everybody, for listening. We will be back for part 2 very soon. I want to thank my guest. She has a great piece on Huffington Post, too, that you can read. And we're having a blast. So watch the live stream if you'd like, and you can ask questions live. And we'll try to. I jumped around too much, but next week we're gonna go to so much stuff that we haven't even got to yet. So, thank you so much. You're really an awesome guest, and thanks for having this conversation. So, all right,
thank you so much,
and thanks to the listeners. Awesome. Share the episode. Follow our social media, and you can watch these live streams and participate. All right, goodbye.
This road leads, then hear this, all ye people. Give ear, all ye inhabitants of the world.
We down?
We are down. And she is still here.